Go.
Awesome. Hello, world. The whole world is here. So we have a bunch of topics that came up that I have written in advance in the scalability meetings. I've already dumped it in the channel about this. I did yesterday. If anyone does not have the link to it, just tell me. Otherwise, let's get the party started. So I started with a bunch of different just the links to the epics. As Bob noted, the two epics that we had originally, one was like create a shardable Thanos environment, and the other one was move the recording rules. Now that we're one team as really one epic, I'm going to do some epic rearrangements for this after we get through everything in this meeting. So either tomorrow or Monday, depending on life. Let's see where we're at. So the current state of the project, we're still hanging out between 3 and 4 digits of precision, depending on metrics availability. The success rate for the rule evaluation has actually been pretty good for the past 30 days. It's 99.979. We broke all of the recordings and staging as part of some of the things that we have done for rule evaluation. So I don't know how good staging is doing right now. I believe that those probably were dependent on some other recording rule that we no longer have. So let me actually make a note. I'll look at that later. But we're doing pretty well right now as far as things go. But the thing that is worth mentioning is we've had a significant number of incidents. There's been a bunch of back and forth there in that Bob said, is it more than we're used to? And Nick answered, and Raul says that he's working on some corrective actions. Do either of you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I just clarify with people that the correction actions I'm working on is just a defensive measure to increase availability in Prometheus. So to defend the availability of Prometheus is not going to solve the problem. The real problem is the amount of samples that we scrape with their cardinality and the very expensive queries that we run. Prometheus is not designed to do that at this size, I'm afraid. So basically, particularly, there's one of correcting actions that what I'm going to do is adding timeouts, because at the moment we don't have query timeouts. The main two areas that I want to focus is query timeouts and reduce cardinality where possible. There's another possibility, which is reduce the samples that Prometheus return. So for example, you run a query that's going to produce a lot of samples that can manage more than the memory. It will stop the query and say, do you asking for too many samples? The problem with query timeouts and with limited series and samples is that can break lots of recording rules, lots of queries, and we don't have visibility about what is broken. So it could be a fight of, oh, you change the timeout to 5 seconds, half of the things that we run is broken. Fighting, okay, oh, make it work. And then that cycle repeats. That's why I mentioned that it's very time consuming. So that's kind of, I put the corrective actions I work in there. Some of them are already in production, particularly you can see the MRs, the liveness prof and the startup prof, they are already in place. My next step is the query timeouts, but that's the one is actually tricky. I might break many things that I'm not aware of yet. Unless this jumps to what Nick's saying, that which is, and what Bob was saying as well, which is like maybe Grafana Mimir or remote grab will help in these areas. And I want to be clear that it's not going to help. It's going to help in the short term, but not in the long term, because the cardinality problem will still need to be tackled. So Grafana Mimir and remote write, particularly, they will behave much better for high cardinality than native Prometheus, but with a limit. It's still If the cardinality still grows, or particularly there's a few time series that is absolutely crazy, so that ones are not going to behave properly, even in Grafana Mimir.
Yeah.
But will the problems then be limited to querying those series? Like I'm thinking, would this limit the blast radius of this stuff? Because now if we reach out to one of the Prometheuses and we make it fall over, then lots of things go wrong.
In the case of remote write, regardless if it's Thanos or Mimir, then you have only one single place when your queries are running. Even though the query path and the write path are very well split, you will still have issues. Like, you might take down a run of the memory in Grafana Mimir or in the carriers in the Thanos remote write, so you still have the same issue. You need to tackle reality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
the
sorry, go ahead,
guardrails, the corrective actions you're doing there is making the failure mode better, basically. Reducing cardinality is improving the long term. Guardrails improve the failure mode, so we don't go down.
We don't go down that often, but we're still going to go down if anyone runs a crazy query. To give you a sample, in the last the day before, 2 days ago, we have Prometheus goes down twice in the same day. One was because we tried to increase the storage, and the operator has a huge issue there. That's for another day. But immediately after it was recovered, it went on, all the 3 Prometheuses were on kill because of a expensive query.
Was that query a human doing a query or part of the system doing a query?
I believe it's a human, because if it's a system, it will happen every day at the same time somehow, right? So I think that probably could be a human. Already in the previous incident, already record some of the expensive queries that Prometheus was running when it was killed, but I don't understand these queries yet, so I'm not sure what is the most expensive one. I can go back to the previous instance and collect again the queries that were running when Prometheus was sick term or on kill. I'm not sure how useful is that, really, looking at these queries.
It's probably not.
I think if you have a couple of them like that, you don't go back in incidents and look for more of them, but the ones that you do have, maybe link them and we can maybe I can recognize them, and if they are in dashboards we can remove them, because then it's probably just somebody opening a dashboard and maybe it's not even something they went to look at. So if we can remove them like that, that's might be a good idea. And if it's a human running them, then I'm probably sorry.
I mean, I think many of them have happened at times I was not running terrible things on Thanos, which makes me happy because I think I have brought it down at least once by doing something stupid. So I feel better about that. So those corrective actions are absolutely things that we'll need to do. I want to.
Can we make sure that in the new environments, these things like most of the things that you linked here are regarding Prometheus, but when we run these things on Thanos, we need to have these kind of limits on the queryers as well, I assume. Can we like validate that we do that right from the get-go?
Remote write with Thanos and with Mimir have different controls and different things. There are no one-to-one relationship with these things I do.
But for the queries, the query path, there must be some similarity, like the query timeouts and so on. Wouldn't those be similar?
I think.
The problem with doing them in Thanos is it basically does like a context cancel, and the query, although the pipe breaks and it's broken to Prometheus, what data has been requested still is trying to load into memory. It takes a while for it to stop, and that's when you get a point where it's still just own kills. But
in the new world, like where tunnel staging is already at, then we wouldn't be reaching out to Prometheus, so that stuff wouldn't be loaded into memory anymore, would it? Or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah. We move the problem in a sense. So rather than fan out and hit every Prometheus instance and potentially kill all the source of our data collection, we would then move the queries to the remote write ingesters where the data is being sent. We'll be querying those. And rather than kill Prometheus, we have the potential to kill those. It's less likely, but we're not in the same situation where we're going to be likely to lose data.
And the failure mode there is if the ingester goes down, Prometheus will retry with a bigger amount of samples, which is also a little bit problematic, but we're not likely to lose data. Correct?
Yeah, it's amount retry up to a limit. So it only buffers so much into its remote write queue, and then it will retry that data. At a certain point, it will age out and it will be lost. But yeah, we move the blast radius basically. It's still a better failure mode because rather than killing the collectors and rarely losing data, we potentially just kill the ingesters, which have a better chance of recovery and not losing data. With recording rules, though, it still has an issue with recording rules not running when they don't have the data there.
Would we have a situation, or let me rephrase this. Assuming that this is human related, and I want to move past this in just a second, but I have one question. Is it possible to point humans and dashboards at a different Thanos querier than the recording rules?
It doesn't really solve the issue. However, when we get into the specifics of Thanos and Mimir, there are things in Mimir that reduce the blast radius again.
Okay.
So I'll probably save that till we move down the list.
Okay. Let's move down the list then, and because I think that's like the next step. So the things I really want to get out of this meeting are, what do we need to get into a healthy place to start the next step of this? Like, what do we need in order to finish off this project? And when can we commit to a date? That's the one thing that this date is like, our current due date is December 15th. And I don't think anyone on this call believes that's going to happen. Like, everyone is like, yeah, no, it's not. I picked that date out of the air, by the way, and I was wrong. The things I want to think about at this point are, I'm concerned about scope creep, and I'm concerned about adding additional things. Like, I want to get us to a place where we are as stable as we can be so that we can roll out the next things and start building on this. And I need to know what everybody's opinions is on what that place looks like. So where we're at right now, and I think that this is accurate. Nobody said it wasn't, so I'm guessing it is. Like, we have in staging, we have a sharded Thanos ruler. We have Thanos using remote write Kubernetes endpoints. I do not believe that we have the VM-based endpoints out yet. Is that accurate?
That's correct, although I found a nifty wee solution to that. So it's less of a problem than I first thought. Okay.
And we have Marco and Hercules and Bob are doing some amount of work to move recording. We're starting to split up these recording rules, some of which will also reduce the cardinality of them as we roll them out, which will make them better. Will it make it as good as we need to be in the end? No, I don't think I think we have, focusing on this is going to be a thing that is not going to be a single project. It's going to be we'll need a system to come into place where we start looking at the cardinality and going through them bit by bit.
The main thing I think that we're going to get out of this project is that recording rules will be more scoped, and we'll be able to add more selectors to those if that helps. What we don't have in this project yet is making sure that all labeling is tip top. Like, I think Nick and Raul know this already. Stephanie as well. Like, we have a bunch of label replace things to actually hack around labels from Kubernetes not being on metrics and that kind of stuff. That's not in scope of this project, but I think we still need to do that.
And I think that is potentially, I don't know if it's necessarily a project, but that is definitely a thing that we'll have to look at and start chopping up piece by piece and digging into and fixing. So that's where we are in staging. Production does not have a sharded Thanos ruler yet, but the prep work is there for it. Nick says, you look like you want to say something, Nick. Say something.
So it does, in the sense that all remote write and production, bar 2 clusters, is now going to Mimir. And
Okay.
Mimir has auto sharding on its
Okay.
ruler. So all of that manual sharding we're doing in runbooks no longer matters.
Okay.
We just need to update runbooks to deploy to Mimir. So that's kind of where that's at on that to-do list. And what that means is, rather than the little bit of Ruby that's in there now, trying to figure out how many instances we have and how many rule groups we have and split them up, it's kind of done automatically within Mimir. So that's going to take a bit of burden away from that as well.
Okay.
But is that something that we can do for production going forward, like right now? Because
that is exactly what the next question
there's some other
is.
things that are different with Grafana Mimir that I don't know about. Yeah, it doesn't
like. I mean, my question on Mimir is this: do we need it in order to do this? Is it going to make what we're doing here much easier? Or is it something that we should do in a separate epic immediately after this?
Yes, it's going to make things easier, and we can't continue productionizing Thanos receiver in its current state. It has too many issues and bugs that I would deem far too critical to put it into production. That's going back to the code base. So to kind of highlight that, it can be running along, receiving metrics, no problems, and then out of nowhere it just starts rejecting metrics, thinking that there's a bunch of out of order samples when there's not.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
Okay, can we get this thing in staging then? Like,
yep, that was my next. So let me just make 2 notes here. Nick, can you, after tomorrow is fine, obviously. I don't want a custom building block. So can you provide some links to, or some description of what the bugs are that we are trying to deal with? You can dump it in this meeting. I don't care where it is. I just know that if we're saying we're going to make an architecture change, we will need backup as to what they are. Also, I would like to read them too. I know about the out of order receiver, but it would be ideal to like provide some, okay. The next question I was going to say is fine. If we've decided that this is the thing and there's, we have good information as to why, we should do this in staging, and we should do it in staging as soon as humanly possible. Right?
So what do you mean by staging?
Thanos staging. Replace Thanos staging with Mimir staging.
Correct.
Right. So in Mimir's current state, there is a separate staging environment and a separate production environment. The production environment we can use in Mimir because it's not used in production in the sense of Thanos. All the data's there. I don't want to replicate all of the data into a staging environment in Mimir purely because we're talking hundreds of.
So let me ask the question that I think I know the answer to, which is, I assume we could test everything out in Mimir staging though, or in Mimir production though, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So it's the same design as what Thanos staging was, in the sense of all of the data is out of band without existing Thanos production. So anything we do in Mimir is in its current state breakable without damaging anything.
And can we like bring it all up to production grade ready and then make an easy switch Easy
That's
switch.
the idea.
That sounds ridiculous, but yeah, you got my.
Yeah, so that's the idea is we can effectively run the data sets in parallel to systems for a period of time. So we've got a bit of a backlog or a bit of a history for the data, because our main sort of period of queryability is the 30 days. That's our most important data set. And if we have that duplicated in Mimir, then it makes the transition a lot easier. What makes it slightly more complicated is when you have small data set in one location or in Mimir, and you do a swap and you have historical data in Thanos. That's a little bit more tedious. There's a way to query both systems, but if we can avoid that, it would be better.
If we start building out our new environment with Mimir, it's not going to be done in 30 days. So I think source metrics are going to go there already, and rules will start coming as they come. But we need at least 30 days to look at things as well. So
correct. Yeah.
So can we set up, like, I'll create an issue for this, but can we set up the ability to push whatever, we can rename it too, but can we set up the ability to push the Thanos staging directory in runbooks to Mimir production?
Yep, that's almost ready to go.
Awesome.
I've set up all the internal routes on that runner so it can push to Mimir. We just have to make a slight change to how it pushes, because we actually use a tool now called Mimir tool. It pushes through an API, and we need to inject a tenant ID into the rules we push.
Okay.
So that's one change we have to make.
Is there a issue for that, or should I make one?
That epic I linked. There's not.
I haven't clicked all your.
Yeah, if you open up that epic, we'll just add an issue.
Yeah.
Integration. Okay. But I encourage everyone to read that epic just on the notes of Mimir and Thanos, because the bugs aside, there's some pretty critical operational problems with scaling Thanos that are highlighted in that epic.
Yeah. Raul, you raised your hand. Did you raise your hand on purpose, or did you raise your hand because
I didn't want to interrupt, but I want
to go for it.
I have a few comments about just discuss. I don't know, maybe because I knew, so bear with me on this. It's not better we have 3 environments instead of 2. The reason for this is very confusing that we use production for something that's not real production, and then we need to do the switch from production to real production, and it's really confusing. In the past, what I was doing is having a staging. So staging is for us for ensure the Grafana Mimir is working. Having pre-production, which is sudden production in data size, and you scale up and down that as you need to do load testing. And having real production, which is like, this is real production. If it's an incident, we need to respond to that incident properly. If we use production now for running at scale, testing the rules, but then we need to do the switch, it's just confusing for me, confusing for others as well, because if you see an incident for Grafana Mimir in production, you will respond, but it's not really an incident because we use testing stuff. And it happened this week with Igor has been responding to incidents for the mini compactor, which like, sorry, no one cares about mini compactor right now because it's not in production, but he's not aware of. So signal that very clear, like there are 3 environments. Staging doesn't matter, pre-production really doesn't matter, only for us for load testing and capacity planning and testing the correctness of the rules. And production is where real we go to production. I think it's much better. And yes, we increase the cost of pre-production and production, but the moment that we have validated the rules and we have validated everything, we just downscale pre-production to keep it cheap, and then we can scale it up again when we want to do more testing or these recording rules or all these things again as we need. And there are 3 different namespaces and different clustering possible where everything separation of concerns, so nothing is missed or manipulated wrong because we miss environments, so basically miss highlighting environments.
I agree with all of that.
Nick,
Especially about
could you expand on why you would prefer not to duplicate the data? Is it cost or?
Ideally, it's cost control cost, but if we can do the thing is that we can duplicate the data with as storage and GCS. That's not an issue whatsoever. But CPU and memory, we don't want to run that in parallel at the scale in production and pre-production for a long time because it would be potentially a lot of money. But during the time being, when we are doing the project, I think it's worth it because production will not scale to production workload as yet, but pre-production will be to all testing. And the moment that we go transition to production, we probably don't need pre-production as much because we have to test everything already. So
and on the cost front, we would already have to do this with the tunnel staging. Like the plan was to do this with the tunnel staging as well and ramp it up to near production levels. So if we put that out,
so
this is the thing.
I'm gonna offer a suggestion, which is I think, yes, I agree with both Raul and Nick, which is hard to say because they don't seem to be agreeing with each other. But I'm going to suggest for the scope of this specific project that we create a few very broad silences for Mimir so that we stop irritating on call. Mimir everything.
I'll just add in the things that are alerting for Mimir aren't Mimir alerts. They are catch-all alerts that go to any service in any cluster.
Right. We can turn those off too, though.
Things
we
like,
do a FTDN.
Is there a volume in a cluster that we have data from that is getting full? Those sorts of things, which are going to be a big headache with like multi-tenanted remote write because it's going to be looking at a lot of data.
But we can still create a silence for that. And the reason I'm going to say this is this. I agree 100% that we need a staging environment. I think that we need a staging environment that has the flexibility to scale up and down based on need, based on testing, based on these things. I think we need a process that rules have to go through the scaling environment before we trash production. I think all of that is out of scope for this project.
My concern is we don't have the tooling to do it properly with the current state of how we're deploying things.
Correct.
Helm files is just a pain in the ass to do any work like this. And we also need to ideally have the ability to easily send data and test rules for specific services and components rather than just an on-off for pre-production, because our metrics we send are massive. They're super high cardinality, as you're going to get sick of hearing. And if we have to scale a pre-production environment to that sort of workload, it's ridiculous the scale we have to get to. If we can get targeted workloads, that would be ideal.
I think it's something we need. Like, I 100% think this is a thing that we need. I just don't necessarily think it's a thing that we need for this project. Would you agree with that, Raul?
Yes. I think it's no more a long-term view to make our life easier than anything.
Oh, absolutely.
The cost that I have is that we still have a lot of side effects of Side or team. Like, it's not only the alerts, it's as well like TimeLam is basically do capacity planning for the Thanos namespace. We missed workloads within the Thanos namespace. So now you get an alert or a ticket, you don't know, is this remote write? It is just normal Thanos, what's wrong here? I make sure have time consuming. So if we can actually scope themes in different namespaces and we are clear about these intentions with other people, it will make our life easier.
Yeah, and I think in the long run, we're all in agreement. We need a way of testing scale before we put things live. The only thing we have going for us in that sense now is Mimir production isn't production in that sense.
Right.
It is kind of pre-production until it becomes production. And as confusing as that be, it may be, we can kind of leverage that for our testing before we do the flip. Because
and this also makes the flip process that has kept me up nights, not even just for this meeting, I think a lot easier, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because
So-
most of the recording rules are firing Grafana. It's just a matter of changing data sources and finding out all the dashboards that aren't templated with a data source variable.
I mean, that we'll just have a lot of broken dashboards, but we'll fix those one piece by piece. I assume that we can keep both environments running side by side for at least a couple of days.
Oh yeah, there's no
Meaning-
need to turn one or
Right.
the other off until we're happy. Absolutely
Okay.
not.
So that makes the actual rollout process much easier. So tell me if the steps that I said that weren't correct. Like,
I have
gonna have
another.
to-
I have another
Oh,
thought on this. If we do
okay, go
make
ahead,
that,
Bob.
if we do make that switch from Thanos to Mimir, and we use the current Mimir production to make it all ready, how long after we've done that until we have a Mimir staging thing where we can, because then it's production and we can't play with it anymore, but it's still brand new. So how long before we have a staging then?
I think that has to be the immediate next epic, honestly.
So we have a staging already in terms of testing componental changes to Mimir. So if we want to test an upgrade, we want to make sure things.
I want to test
run
recording rules. That's
properly.
where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So if we need another system to test recording rules, we need to decide what the scope of the testing is. If we're saying we need to test recording rules that touch every cluster in production, then that's another thing we have to figure out in terms of how do we deal with that data scale. For most situations, we could potentially do that with a replicated bucket where we're just only concerned about the query path and we're not looking at current data. So we could actually test things over slightly stale data as an alternative, because the query path's a lot less expensive than the ingestion. It's the ingestion of all the metrics that costs a lot to run.
But then we're missing the bit with the receiver that needs to be queried. Like, I don't know exactly how the Mimir architecture, but I thought it was mentioned that
But are you talking about after we've rolled this out to production? Or before after we've rolled out Mimir to production, or before we've rolled out Mimir to production?
as soon as we can't play with Mimir anymore because it will wake up people in the night, I want to have a place where I can do things without waking people up.
Agreed. And I think that the correct way to handle this is that we will flesh out an epic for that and have that be the thing that we start working on as soon as we're done with, or as soon as we're approaching the end of this. Does that make sense? Everyone's nodding, so I think that sounds like yes. Okay, so I had a plan to get this done, which is of course totally wrong. Let me just like, it's totally wrong. The plan that I am aware of at this point in time, I'm just going to be like, Stephanie says new plan. Stephanie says new plan. Step one.
Just before you go to spelunking down there, the recording rule logic and the decisions around the recording rules are exactly the same. Nothing.
Yes, I knew that.
Right. Yeah. Just
So that work can continue as planned, slowly, because we only have that much
Correct.
capacity, but
yeah.
we can just keep going and tacking away at making, like, we still need to make sure that all the Prometheus instances are no longer performing any recording. Yeah. That's still a thing
Once
we
the
can do.
recording rules are out as well, we can shard the Prometheus agents by making their target scope smaller and making more of them, which means also it reduces the blast radius of failures when they do die. So that is another win by doing this as well.
So do we move the recording rules to our current Thanos production as well? The ones from Prometheus?
I would be inclined to let them continue running as they are, and we just do this for Mimir.
I would agree with that. I think the least amount of work that we can do in two places, the better. Also because like at some point I would really like this to be finished. So I wrote down what I call Stephanie says new plan. Step 1, we need the ability to push to Mimir production. What is the rough time frame for that, Nick? Like, are we talking tomorrow, next week, February of 2024?
So it can be ready to go as soon as A, the CI is updated, and B, I figure out how to do a tenant injection, which may need some JSONet runbooks expertise.
I can help there if necessary, but could you write down in a thing how the rule rollout and deployment and so on will look? Because yeah, Helm files is not one of my my favorite repositories. And
no, so it's exactly how we're doing it in runbooks now, and where we do a kubectl apply on deploying Prometheus rule objects, we actually just deploy Prometheus rules in their native state through a Mimir API, and they go into the ruler as you would go through the Prometheus config docs and write a Prometheus rule in their like raw form. So we just write them as we're writing them now. We push them through CI to Mimir. The only thing we have to add with Mimir is a tenant identifier to say this is the GitLab production tenant. And I was thinking it might be nice to tie that in with the folder generation. If we're looking at generating folders for environments, if we do a folder prefix for tenants as well, and have a option to do that, then we can actually parse that out of the directory structure when we push.
Yeah, that sounds nice. I'm happy to help with that. Like we already started doing this with staging, like environment, and then we could continue cluster and so on. Yeah, if you ping me on an issue, and I can see if we can get new folders and stuff going in the runbooks, and then we can abandon the current tunnel staging thing and replace that stuff out. Does that sound?
Yep.
Is that the idea?
I think that's
Yep. Nick, can you make an issue for that? I said Nick will make an issue for that. So I'm going to ask you this a couple more times. So here's step 1, number 1. What is the length of time that we think this will take to get done? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a week?
What is this?
The ability to push to thank you, Bob, for that. The ability to push rules to Mimir production from runbooks. I'm going to pad all of this, by the way. So like, be honest, and we'll go from there.
I think Bob probably can provide insights on the JSONet. I can write the issue and basically say what needs to be done. But the JSONet side,
okay,
I don't imagine it sounds like a lot of the legwork's been done. So maybe a week.
I think like the legwork is basically the same as we had for tunnel staging. I think like we just need to make a new Mimir rules directory, and inside we have a tenant. Inside the tenants we have environments. Inside the environments we have services or clusters or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So that's step 1. Step 2 is the work on the recording rules keeps going, and we push it all to Mimir. Bob and or Marco and or whoever wants to answer this one and ask the same question. What's the time frame to get all of that completed? Now,
that's the recording rule part.
Yes, that is correct. Moving all of the recording rules out of Prometheus and into, in this case, Mimir. Keep in mind, we are 25 days from the big holiday for most of a lot of the places. And there are other complications involved in this as well, in that I think at least Nick is probably going to be on call again too. I think Nick goes on call relatively shortly, right? Aren't you on call next week? Something like that?
Yeah, if it's not next week, it's the week after.
Okay. So if I said, Bob, how long is it going to take to move all of these recording rules out of Prometheus and into Mimir? What is the amount of time that you would say?
Um,
I'm aware that this is not a good, I'm aware that all of this is hard. We have to set a date that we have to meet. So I'm going to make this bigger probably, but
we didn't try the most complex yet, so it's
no,
Yeah,
but the most
I-
complex,
difficult.
the most complex, I'm like less worried about, because we thought about it a lot. Like you were working on the utilization ones, and we haven't looked at those very much yet. So stuff falls out that we didn't expect, like the labeling, the aggregation labeling.
I mean, give me a guesstimate.
A guesstimate.
Like, again, I'm gonna look at this and consider it, and probably talk to Liam as well. But are we talking 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months?
I think more in the 4-6 weeks range, but that's not really counting the holidays.
Okay. The we test this out thoroughly part is kind of going to come as part of this entire process.
This is a big question mark now that we've made the call to do all of this in Mimir. I've never, like, how can we use Mimir? How can we query Mimir right now?
In Grafana.
It's already there as a data source?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
that's
missing
great.
two clusters from production, which I've got planned for tomorrow. But USC C and one C and D are there currently.
That's and one, can we have a global one?
There is a global GitLab one, which, to break it down, we split tenants up to their own data source, and this is a part of that blast radius mechanism. So if I was let's take code suggestions, I opened up the tenant for code suggestions, and I did a bad query where I said, give me all of the container metrics, rather than fanning out across every Prometheus and every cluster that Thanos would do. It's limited to their tenant metrics, so it can only affect subsets of the data. So that applies with GitLab as well, except in GitLab, we've broken down tenants per environment just because we have such a large volume of metrics.
Yeah.
But we do have a multi-tenanted data source, which can query across all the GitLab environments. So that's gprod, gstaging, and pre.
Is that already? Yeah, but like we'll all need to play around with that. Is that already set up for all environments, or you said no, there was one thing you needed to additionally do?
No, it's set up. There's a Mimir global data source in there.
So Mimir, let me just be as clear as possible. Mimir already has access to all of the same data sources as Thanos.
Thanos staging, if I got it right. Remote.
No, I was actually asking about Thanos. But
no, so in Thanos and Mimir, we're looking at sending all of the remote write data for the SaaS product. So basically anything that's running GitLab.com. When you say all data sources in Thanos, there are other environments in Thanos that don't relate to GitLab.com currently. So these are things like DB benchmarking.
Right.
Which I'm sure you're not totally concerned about right now. But
no, I'm not. But
specifically, I just wanted to clarify that.
My specific concern at this point is Mimir production, which is what we're going to use for staging, because we're going to be as confusing as possible. Does it already have access to all of the VMs, all of the all of the other pieces. Raul is shaking his head, so that implies, like, specifically, does it have a like-to-like data set with Thanos production?
No, that's what I just said before. We have all of staging, 2 zonals in production, and the other 2 Kubernetes clusters I'm onboarding tomorrow, and then we still have to do the VMs.
Okay.
Which is where how we handle the VM service discovery, and I sort of came up with an easier solution for that today.
So we need to do that as well as
Mhm.
part of the sort of get ready for that. Is that also like about a week?
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, I've not said this yet. I both am available to help with things and would very much like to help with things. I'm going to go troll around and figure out what Nick has been doing by looking at his MRs. But like, if there are tasks that you can farm off to someone else who has all the SRE access and sort of knows what she's doing, I'm here for you. So please share. I'm happy to do grunt work and terrible things too. Okay, so Bob says 4 to 6 so we need to have Mimir. We already can look at Mimir. We're gonna test this out relatively thoroughly because we are gonna push all these recording rules, right? Like there's no, I don't think we need to necessarily have a testing process in the same fashion as part of this general plan to go forward, just because as we iterate on recording rules, we'll push them to this environment, right? Everyone is nodding. The switchover then is Grafana data sources, correct? It's just move Grafana to this. What about things like alerts? Right. Tamlin we can move as soon as we have all the recording rules. That would be the
That's just we need a URL to query there.
Yeah.
Like just
Alert Manager is currently using the existing alert managers. There is alert managers within Mimir. That is a Mimir specific type of alert manager that can do like tenant isolated alerting, but for simplicity, I've kept it with the existing alert manager because there's a lot of tech debt with like
that's fine.
Receivers and routes that have been built into that. So I thought let's not scope creep and start migrating alert manager as well.
The routes are also just from some horrible JSON that was a single file and is still a single file. It's just gigantic now. So
yeah, but there's things in there like all the Slack alerts could be a single route that just has an annotation for the channel or something like that, you know.
So Mimir presently is sending alerts or not? Because that's the other piece that we'll have to make sure that we do not send alerts. Like
it definitely can send alerts if you put in alerting rules.
Okay, but we have not pushed the.
We have not pushed any alerting rules, and that's a note to take for alerting rules.
So, in order to do this, in the actual switchover is push alerting rules to Mimir, remove them from Thanos. Essentially, right? Yes, because we do not want to page the EOC twice for everything.
I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this in one go. I want to have both next to each other.
This is a bunch of different things that we're going to be doing. Like my assumption is that the first thing that we'll move over to this is Tamland because we have complete control over it. And why not?
How easy is it in runbooks to specify like the labeling on an alert and say, let's not send anything to PagerDuty, for example, but send everything to a dedicated Slack channel? So
quite easy. If you give me a selector that needs to reroute all the alerts to a certain thing, I can probably write that up for you.
I'm just wondering whether we let it fire alerts, but we just send them to like a black hole sort of Slack channel.
That sounds great.
I love that.
It shouldn't be any issues if we fire the same alerts with the same labels, because alert manager being the same would be to duplicate the alerts and only fire one alert at all to PagerDuty or whatever we want to send them. So there shouldn't be any problem if it's set up correctly.
So you're saying
Yeah,
that this is a problem we can ignore.
The main mission of Alert Manager is to duplicate alerts. So when you run into Prometheus or many Prometheuses, all of them sending alerts to the same Alert Manager, what it does is like grouping by, and it does a waiting time, which basically means that only fires one alert to PagerDuty or Slack by doing the grouping and the waiting group, right? So in Mimir, Prometheus, both of them are firing the same alert with the same labels. They will be grouped by the same labels, and they will be waiting for the time they set up. So you don't have any issues if you're pushing all the alerts to the same alert manager. That's the whole idea of alert manager in the first place.
We need an issue to double check this and then figure out an approach.
Trust me, there's like so much issue creation out of this. I'm going to do a lot of it.
The benefits of that is that you can see the metrics about how many alerts Grafana Mimir is firing versus Prometheus firing. And then when we do the switch, it's basically a switch off the other path, and then you already have alerts going, right? So it makes for life validating easier.
Yeah, and that's
we
the
do
thing
have to check the labeling though, because we do have unique label sets coming through Mimir. So we just have to make sure we're grouping by the right things.
Yeah, and I also like we should be as like the one thing I do not want to do is page the EOC, or worse, not page the EOC. Like duplicate pages is irritating. No pages and something is broken is worse. So, but we'll make sure that that's all put down in an issue, and it's a thing that we look at when we get to that point. So I think that almost everything else that was asked on this, we can just trash. Does anyone else have other, like, the other thing was all about how do we roll this out to Thanos staging, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we're not going to. Does anyone else have anything else to say before I return to the nice warmth of my bed?
I think it's advisable that we have either a scalability, what are we called now? Let's just say scalability for simplicity.
Scalability observability is our team.
/ observability, yeah. Either a recorded meeting I can do or another sync where we actually just go over Mimir and we do a basic, this is how it works, these are the components, these are the things to be concerned about.
Yep.
Just so it's not
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, just so it's not a one or two people with all the knowledge, which we have a lot of things floating around with that. So
two options for that. One is we just schedule it as one of the demos and have it part of recording. Another option is we can take a smaller subset of this group and walk through it and record it and then share it. I say a smaller subset because I love you all, but I'm not doing that at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm happy to overlap with Nick and be the person who asks the stupid questions. And I'm fine with us two just doing that if you want, because we have a reasonable amount of overlap. But if we can do it in a demo, that would be even better. I just know that the demo times are a little bit up in flux.
Yeah, that was the only thing. They a little bit changing at the moment, and there still isn't one in my time zone.
Yeah. So why don't we do a shorter thing, Nick? And I will set up some time with you. Are you capable of doing this next week? Like, do you need prep? Okay, I'll set up some time with you next week, where you will walk through Mimir to me. I will invite other people if you want to come, but it's probably not going to be a good time zone for you. And I will ask as many smart questions as possible, and we can share it. Does that seem reasonable?
Yep.
Let me note that I said I would do that.
And I think everyone will be pleasantly surprised that it's very identical to Thanos in a high-level picture. So any knowledge you have of Thanos is pretty translatable. It's the semantics that get a little bit different.
Okay. That was a good call too, Bob. Thanks. Does anyone else have anything else? I think we're in a better place. Tomorrow I'm gonna go through and open a million bazillion issues. and start cleaning up these epics. So there's going to be a lot of Stephanie moving things around and or closing things out. Not the part about the recording rules. I'm not going to touch any of that. That's not changing. I'm just
But
probably
maybe
gonna...
add some of the Mimir stuff and so on that we need to do into the same epic.
That's my
because
exact
the goal is
plan.
yeah, the goal is to get this done.
Yep. I suspect, looking at the dates that are here, that the answer for when we get this completed is probably somewhere between mid-January to end of January. However, I need to actually go over it again and look a little bit more closely. But that's
I would add at least 2 weeks because of 2 weeks of holiday.
I agree. But I do think, and I also want to, like I said, I also want to run this by Liam, so I will chat with him about it. Before
and maybe check on call schedules for the people that are here that have.
I'm going to do all of those things and come up with a date, and we will make this date, because if we don't make this date, I'm going to cry. Do you want to see me cry? You do not. It has slipped twice now, and it slipped twice now for the fact that this was a much bigger piece of work than we all thought it was at the beginning. But I do want to get it actually finished. So let's go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to ask about, mainly to Bob and Hercules, I guess, for the coding rules part that we're moving out, I guess, how are going to distribute the tasks on the high level, or just feel free to
pick up an issue, like assign it to yourself, and that way, as soon as you start doing it, assign it to yourself, move it to in progress, and then nobody else will pick it up. But if you feel like something is and if you have questions on anything that I've written down there, please ask, because I did that quickly before going on PTO, and maybe some of the issues aren't as fleshed out as they should be yet. So feel free to reach out. And
by the way, if anyone else wants to do JSON it, like that, nothing says that Marco and Hercules has to do all of it either. Like, Raul, if you want to pick one of these issues up and write some JSON it, like, knock yourself out. No one will stop. Maybe
the first thing Raul could do is add docs on it. That would be cool.
I mean, like,
no, that's code creep, but we need to do it eventually.
Yeah, I know. Okay, that's like, let's grab issues.
I need to
and
drop off.
Yeah, I do too. Thank you all. Bob, you'll upload the recording and put it in the doc. Awesome. Thank you all. I will put out a bunch of issues, and I'm going to tag the whole world on them, so it'll be fun. Nick, you had something to say?
I was just going to say, just everyone remember that this doesn't escape the inevitable cardinality audit that's coming.
No, it doesn't. But that is like, I'm going to call out explicitly that we have a couple of things that have to be follow-ups for this, and one of them is continuing to work on cardinality and continuing to work on cleaning up metrics that aren't being used.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a haul as well, because we have a lot of metrics that are the major offenders built heavily into a lot of availability metrics, which are going to be challenging. So, but anyway,
cool. Thank you all.
All right, see ya.